I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word SHOW to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word SHOW, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text SHOW to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, but not just that, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. Get the live stream, the show notes, the podcast. In fact, if you subscribe to the show notes, my morning piece, I want to spend a little bit of time on. I've been wanting to articulate this for a little bit, and I actually ran this through Claude last night, and then again this morning before I hit publish. And I wasn't sure so I wrote a piece. This is actually now kind of fascinating to me. I wrote a piece, and then I put it into Claude, the AI chat thing that even the Defense Department uses, and said, Claude, take all the stuff I've written and see if I've missed some points that I should add to this piece, but it's got to be less than 700 words, and here's the premise. And then I put the whole piece in, and then said, hey, you should add these couple of things. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is actually worth my time. It didn't write it for me. It just said, hey, you forgot to make a couple of these points that you've made in the past based on your prior writing. And I was really impressed with that. So I want to spend some time on that with my Claude Assist here for the points that I had not made. Because if you go online or you go on television right now, there are a lot of people screaming about international law and the shattering of norms by Donald Trump. There's a particular kind of intellectual dishonesty, and it's masquerading as principle, particularly on the left, and it's called either international law or norms. They're invoked with religious fervor whenever the United States or Israel, but a lot of our allies, take any action around the world. They conveniently forget about it when the enemies of civilization act out. Watch the pattern, and the conclusion becomes very unavoidable here that the left's commitment to international law is not really a commitment to international law. It's used to constrain the United States of America. So look at what's happening right now. Our military engagement against Iran has the usual coalition of academics and think tankers, progressive politicians, the anti-Semites, the op-ed writers. They're all clutching their pearls, screaming international law, international norms, based international order, the rule of law. Many of them are calling the United States a rogue nation. They're calling us a state sponsor of terrorism because the president of the United States decided it was time to end Iran's regime of terror and their quest for nuclear weapons. But also, none of them said anything on the morning of October 7th, 2023. For those of you who don't recognize that date, most of you are on the left, Hamas, strapped on parachutes with propellers behind them, sailed across the border from Gaza and launched the deadliest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. They crossed an internationally recognized border. They slaughtered over 1,200 civilians. They kidnapped babies. They kidnapped elderly women. They kidnapped young men, all of them at a music festival. They went into the kibbutz. They murdered people there. They filmed it. They celebrated it. And the international law crowd did not rush out to scream about international law. Very few of them rushed out to condemn Hamas. There were no emergency seminars on the laws of armed conflict. There were no demands for immediate condemnation from the UN Security Council. There was instead a noticeable pause, followed in many quarters by attempts to contextualize the attack, explain Hamas's grievances, and they pivoted immediately to concerns about what Israel might do. There were also marches in the streets on college campuses celebrating Hamas. Where were the norms? Where was the rule of law? Where was international law? They had nothing to say on the situation. When Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine in February 2022, it was a textbook act of aggression and a violation of international law. One sovereign nation invading another without provocation. They shelled apartment buildings. They targeted hospitals. They deported Ukrainian children. The UN Charter supposedly exists precisely to stop this sort of thing. And the post-World War II order was constructed around the idea that this kind of naked territorial conquest was done. We weren't going to do these things anymore. Strongly worded resolutions and furrowed brows and lectures on international law did not stop Vladimir Putin from the invasion of Ukraine. He shattered the norms and the carefully constructed legal architecture the left tried to treat as sacred scripture. But they only do that when the United States and Israel act, don't they? International law and practice restrains only those who choose to be restrained by it. The nations most likely to be restrained by international law are the Western democracies the left doesn't like. It's not an accident. Much of what passes for the international legal consensus these days was built in the decades after the Cold War, during the period of American dominance, when the global left, including within American institutions, worked diligently to construct frameworks that would hem in American power. Treaties on the laws of war applied asymmetrically. Hamas can fire from hospitals and then they pass and everybody shrugs. And when Israel responds to the firing from the hospital, it becomes a war crime. A UN Human Rights Council populated with nations with records that would embarrass a medieval warlord, mock the standards of international law the left insists are real when the United States acts. The architects of international law, they were never neutral. The architecture was never neutral. The architects, using their architecture, wanted to constrain the West, while providing cover for everybody else in the world. When the left screams about international law in context of Iran, a regime that has spent 50 years funding terrorism, developing nuclear weapons frameworks, and calling for the destruction of Israel, they're not invoking a principle. They're deploying a tool built to restrain the United States and Israel. Real principle would look like this. You're outraged at Hamas for what it did, and you are willing to say international law means nothing if the most dangerous actors on the earth face no consequence for what they did. But the left doesn't want to do that. Until they're willing to apply their standards consistently, those of us watching, we're not obligated to take them seriously. They built a cage. The left did. The left built a cage. They labeled that cage civilization. But they only ever meant to put two nations inside that cage. Both instead are soaring, unrestrained over Iran, liberating a people the left cares nothing about. I don't know if you guys saw this yesterday. There were protests in Ireland, in Dublin. And good white progressives of Dublin came marching into the streets to the protesters to attempt to shut down their protest, telling them that they didn't know what they were talking about, telling them Iran was the victim. These were Iranian resident or Iranian people who have fled to Ireland who were protesting Iran, and the Irish were lecturing the people who have fled the tyranny, telling them they didn't know what they were talking about. It's genuinely nuts to me to watch what we're watching. You know, when I took international law in law school, I was fascinated by it. I took EU law, which is nuts, by the way. The European Union law is insane. I took that. I also took I took international law and international relations and law school. And I was just, it's so absurd. When there's peace, nations construct frameworks by which they engage in trade with each other. But the idea that there is this rubric of international law that will prevent a country from invading another country is nonsensical idealism believed by a left that only really believes that stuff when it works on the West, in large part because they constrain the United States of America. It's just interesting to me that we have these people today who are throwing these words about, and they only care about those words when it applies to the United States. And there are a lot of people right now who are hating on the United States. The Democratic talking point, let me read you the Democratic talking point right now that is circulating this morning. This is from Brian Schatz, the senator from Hawaii. This war is costing $1 billion a day. In one effing month, we will spend more over there than we needed to save health care for more than 2 million Americans. They literally are taking away your food and your health care for this regime change war of choice. You notice that too, the war of choice. We chose to fight it now before Iran had so many weapons we couldn't stop them. Before they had nuclear weapons, they couldn't stop us. And you know who else is embracing this, of course, is Marjorie Taylor Greene, the former congresswoman some of you liked until a few months ago. War with Iran is costing American taxpayers $1 billion a day. Most American taxpayers will never receive a Social Security check because it'll be bankrupt by 2033. Most Americans can't afford health insurance policies because they're so expensive. All of them rushing to the standard Democratic talking points. They went from screaming about international law last week to screaming about the cost of health care this week when they couldn't deter it. It's just remarkable to me to see this. By the way, you know, the United States sank an Iranian ship in international waters, and literally the same people are treating international waters as some sort of sacred territory, where because of the sacred territory, you're not allowed to attack. You're not allowed to take action because it was international territory off the coast of India, as if international waters means it's some neutral territory. Again, these are the same people who defended paragliding terrorists and drone attacks on hotels. Let me just read you. This is Saeed Abbas Araghchi, who is the foreign minister of the Iranian Republic. The U.S. has perpetuated an atrocity at sea 2,000 miles away from Iranian shores. Frigate Dina, a guest of India's Navy carrying almost 130 sailors, was struck in international waters without warning. The U.S. will come to bitterly regret precedent it has set. What about the USS Cole? You know, my family lived in Dubai. When I was in ninth grade, we had to house the USS Samuel B. Roberts enlisted. A lot of them stayed in our house. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, when I was in ninth grade, or eighth grade, I think ninth grade, was in the Persian Gulf, hit an Iranian mine. They saved the ship. The ship, thankfully, didn't sink. They had to put it in dry docks in Dubai. And the sailors, a lot of them, I would wake up in the morning, literally, no exaggeration, wake up in the morning and there would be sailors asleep on the floor in my bedroom and around our house. They'd sleep on the couch. They'd come over. My parents would cook for them, do laundry for them. It was a wild time, frankly, to be alive and to be growing up and have sailors come to our house all the time. My parents would organize a block party and stuff like this for the enlisted. Just wonderful, wonderful people and a wonderful time. The United States was not at war with Iran, but the Iranians mined territory, and one of our ships hit one of the mines. The Iranians tried to blow up my school when I was in fifth grade. The Iranians tried to blow up my dad's oil platform when I was in ninth grade. The Iranians do all of these things, and suddenly this is a war of choice, and we will rue the day with the precedent we set in nonsense. Seriously, this is nonsensical stuff by the left intended to hem in the United States and Israel. It's always about Israel. And I'm glad we have a president of the United States right now who said, no, I'm glad we have a president of the United States right now who said he was going to do what he's going to do. I'm glad we have a president of the United States right now who's decided we've got to stop humoring a rogue regime. I saw a supposed intellectual heavyweight who writes for The Atlantic claim that we had free reign of airspace over Vietnam during the Vietnamese War. Now, John McCain, of course, who was shot down, would be very surprised by this, but that's what they claim, that this is just like Vietnam now. They have no metaphor for this engagement. They had no metaphor for what the president did in Venezuela. They had no metaphor for these things that the president has been able to do. They have no metaphor for success. All they can do is expect to lose. All they can do is wish that we lose. And what we're seeing is open cheering on the idea of the United States losing because these people hate Donald Trump so much they would root against the United States and cite the failures of international law. So I'm in Washington, D.C. If you didn't know, I'll fly home tonight. I had meetings of the right-wing conspiracy up here as well. And what is notable to me being here is the buzz in think tank world and among the journo set that there is concern about the end game in Iran. There actually is. There is concern about whether or not the people who take over, will we be able to trust them? Because you can't trust the existing Iranian regime. There's also concern about will whichever regime come in, will it be more destabilizing? Will there be a civil war? Will the Arab partners be involved with it? Things like that. There are some legitimate concerns. But one of the other concerns that I find notable are the number of people who are wondering how this is going to help Donald Trump. Will it embolden Trump? I have a sneaking suspicion. In fact, this was I had a 8:30 meeting that must go unmentioned. And one of the things that came up in the 8:30 meeting was the potential for the Democrats to be so unhinged. Like, take the James Tallarico stuff. How insane the Tallarico stuff is. And then you got the Graham Plantner stuff in Maine. The guy is a Nazi, and we're watching from the bulwark crowd to the mainstream Democrats coming in and saying, hey, he's not really a Nazi. So he had a Nazi-like tattoo. He didn't have a Nazi-like tattoo. He actually had a Nazi tattoo. He's been on a podcast of a Nazi. He has retweeted Nazis. He has credited Nazis and given them admiration. The guy's a Nazi. Looks like a Nazi, talks like a Nazi, thinks like a Nazi. He's a Nazi. And for years, the Democrats, like I'm watching people who vilified me. We thought you were a man of principle for backing Herschel Walker in the Republican general election. I warned people not to back Herschel. I told people it wouldn't go well. He was the nominee, so I supported him. I was happy to support him. He was the Republican nominee. And I'm watching people who vilified me for supporting Herschel Walker. Don't you know what he did? Yes, and I warned people about it. Who are now like, hey, yeah, the Nazi, he's great. Wow. Okay, I got to tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You can get 3 of them. You can save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. Eden, like the Garden of Eden, pure as the driven snow. EdenPureDeals.com. Discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3. You get a money-back guarantee on these Eden Pure Thunderstorms if they don't wipe out odors. Now, they're an air purifier, so they get rid of dust, pollen, all that sort of stuff. They get rid of bacteria and viruses, well, 99.9% of them, the lawyers would have me say. But where they really shine is odor elimination. I've got one with me. Now, I haven't had to use it, but it's small enough. I keep it in my travel bag, and it just works. And you can get 3 of them. You can save $200. And if they don't wipe out your odors, you get a money-back guarantee. All the details are on the website. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. Eden, like the Garden of Eden, pure as the driven snow. EdenPureDeals.com. Get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms and save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. Discount code ERIC3. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here live from Washington, D.C. The phone number, 877-973-7425. I want to spend a little more time here. I'm not done with this topic, and we got lots of stuff to talk about, but I want to go back to the James Tallarico stuff. And I want to go back to Tallarico because the Democrats are suddenly freaked out. They walked into a trap. They didn't understand that they walked into a trap. They're having a hard time wrapping their head around this. I want to play you. This is some audio from James Tallarico doing a campus conversation on immigration. You got to listen to this guy.
Do you know any undocumented immigrants?
No, I do not.
When I was a teacher on the west side of San Antonio, I taught a lot of students who were undocumented. And I don't want to stereotype, but those students tended to be the most patriotic, the hardest working students that I had in the classroom. And again, I haven't stated this enough to say this definitively, but there are interpretations of certain passages from the Torah where some folks will even say that there's some subtle instructions for how to perform an abortion in the ancient world, certain things to drink, things like that. Before we go further, I want to acknowledge that our trans community needs abortion care too. Defending trans Texans is something we have to do every day at the state capitol. And you better believe I'll be giving sermons on that too. I want us all to be aware of is that modern science obviously recognizes that there are many more than two biological sexes. In fact, there are 6. Is both masculine and feminine and everything in between. God is non-binary. So this idea that to be a Christian means you have to be anti-gay and anti-abortion, there really is no historical, theological, biblical basis for that opinion. So this idea that to be a Christian means you have to be anti-gay and anti-abortion, there really is no historical, theological, biblical basis for that opinion. And if you think about it from a Christian perspective, something interesting that Jesus does throughout his ministry is he is breaking first century norms about women, talking with women, learning from women, having women lieutenants in his movement. And this was something that was kind of unheard of in the first century. The longest conversation Jesus has with anybody in the whole Bible is with the Samaritan woman at the well. And so this affirmation of women as full and equal people is a huge part of the Jesus movement, especially the early church. And then the last, I think, story I would go to is the story of Mary. Mary is probably my favorite figure in the Bible, the mother of Jesus. And, you know, she's an oppressed peasant, teenage girl living in poverty under an oppressive empire as a Jew. And she has a vision from God that she's going to give birth to a baby who's going to bring the powerful down from their thrones, going to scatter the proud, who's going to send the rich away empty. I mean, this revolutionary song that she sings, it's called the Magnificat. And it's actually been banned by certain authoritarian regimes because it is so radical. But I say all this in context of abortion because before God comes over Mary and we have the incarnation, God asks for Mary's consent, which is remarkable. I mean, go back and read this in Luke. I mean, the angel comes down and asks Mary if this is something she wants to do. And she says, if it is God's will, let it be done. Let it be. Let it happen. So to me, that is an affirmation in one of our most central stories that creation has to be done with consent.
You got that? The enunciation, by the way, there was no asking of consent. You can read Luke, as he says, read Luke. God chose someone he knew would do this. There was no, hey, will you let me? This is what's going to happen. And she says, okay. The pregnancy of Mary, since the very early Christian church, and again, y'all, there are history books on this, and he doesn't appear to have read a history book. But there are early histories of the church where the very idea that because Mary carrying Christ, something could have happened, the Romans could have killed her and could have killed the Christ. That's why the early church was so pro-life. Do you know where the word abortion comes from? The slang term for the Roman trash heap was the abori. And an abortion was when a woman would give birth and they would dump the child on the ash heap, in the trash pile, and let the child die. And the early Christians would go rescue the children and raise them as their own. And it was considered freakish by the Romans. And it was one of the reasons that the Christians were persecuted, because they were saving the Roman children and raising the Roman children. They were that pro-life. And it was their abortions, the Romans' abortions, and the early church would save the kids from the abortion, which at that time meant putting them in a trash heap and letting them die. And Tallarico wants to twist it all. He believes that God's non-binary. By the way, if you heard that one clip where he says that there are 6 genders, he's the only one in the room wearing an N95 mask. Of course. He believes that the illegal aliens, who he calls undocumented, are more patriotic than others. He uses, unironically, the phrase Latinx. Yes, he actually uses the phrase Latinx.
Our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front.
Other statements of his. Let me read you this tweet. There, but by the grace of God go I. As a white man, I'm susceptible to the same radicalization. Thankfully, I was exposed to diversity as a young age and explicitly taught the values of equality, inclusion, and justice. But not every young white boy is so lucky. I mean, these are just bizarre. Also, here's another one. You're going to love this one.
As citizens. Every one of our neighbors with a uterus.
Every one of our neighbors with a uterus. Not women, our neighbors with a uterus. White skin gives me and every white American immunity from the virus, but we spread it wherever we go. Through our words, our actions, and our systems, we don't have to be showing symptoms like a white hood or a Confederate flag to be contagious. That's it. By the way, the Texas Capitol can be a hostile environment for our trans neighbors. Our office is the first in the history of the Texas Capitol to add pronouns to our official business cards. So this is James Tallarico's record. Modern science obviously recognized that there are many more than 2 biological sexes. In fact, there are 6, he says. Then there is this.
I often think when reclaiming symbols, I think about the American flag. I think the Confederate flag is a symbol of treason and terrorism, but the American flag is such a complicated symbol for most of us, and in many ways, like Jesus, like the cross, it's been co-opted and in some ways, its true meaning has been betrayed. I often think
you got that, y'all. This is again, this is probably one of my favorite ones, and there are so many of these.
Before we go further, I want to acknowledge that our trans community needs abortion care too. Defending trans Texans is something we have to do every day.
You got that. The trans community needs abortion care too. Oh, and then there was this very predictable one.
Poverty is violence. Pollution is violence. And yes, prison is violence.
Prison.
Dismantle this system of violence. Build something new, something better, something rooted in love.
Y'all, there are so many of these. It was not hard. It was not hard to find these. His Twitter account is full of them. We must confront racism and misogyny everywhere, from the schoolhouse to the White House. Words have consequences. Dehumanization always leads to violence. He authored the legislation in Texas to require DEI training in every school in Texas. The record is there. Now, here's the thing that you have to understand. The Democrats chose him over a black woman because they thought he would be more relatable and less controversial. And I was telling the Democrats in the primary, you guys don't understand. You do not understand what this guy is going to do to you with moderate white people and with black and Hispanic voters. You do not understand. And, the response right now is that, well, he did okay with Hispanic Democratic voters, but Hispanic Democratic primary voters happen to be super, super, super liberal. Most Hispanic voters are not primary voters. They're general election voters. And I raised the red flag. flag. I warned everybody that Jasmine Crockett is not going to be as radicalizing as James Tallarico is in a general election. And they were like, nope, we can't have the black woman. So they have a guy who put this on Twitter, quote, black Americans in a church, Mexican Americans in a store, Asian Americans in a spa. Radicalized white men are the greatest domestic terror threat in our country. Got that? He's talking about shootings by white men, Asian Americans in a spa, Mexican Americans in a store, black Americans in a church. Radicalized white men are the greatest domestic terror threat in our country. Meanwhile, his party won't reopen Homeland Security at a time of war. Oh, wait, here's another one. This is him with Ezra Klein.
How do you think about the competing claims of different religions? Christianity to be more true than other religions? Do you believe there to be exclusivity in these beliefs, that they're incompatible with each other?
I believe Christianity points to the truth. I also think other religions of love point to the same truth. I think of different religious traditions as different languages. So you and I could sit here and debate what to call this cup, and you could call it a cup in English, you'd call it something else in Spanish and French, but we are all talking about the same reality. I believe Jesus Christ reveals that reality to us, but I also think that other traditions reveal that reality in their own ways with their own symbol structures. And I've learned more about my tradition by learning more about Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam and Judaism. And so I see these beautiful faith traditions as circling the same truth about the universe, about the cosmos. And that truth is inherently a mystery. And I think the most destructive thing is when religion becomes an end in and of itself. That's when religion implodes. My pastor always told me growing up that religious symbols are like aspirin. In order to work, they have to dissolve. They point beyond themselves. If you get lost in the symbols, if you get lost in the words, you're missing the reality that we're all trying to describe and talk about.
Now, if you're a white progressive, that may sound normal to you, but it sounds bat crap crazy to anyone who's an Orthodox Christian. The idea that other religions also point to the truth. Jesus Christ said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the light, or the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Christianity is an exclusive religion. Islam is an exclusive religion. He says that it points to the truth, the reality, which is a mystery. If it's a truth, how's it a mystery? The symbols have to dissolve? No, the symbols don't have to dissolve. If you're a progressive white person, you may listen to this and be nodding along with this, but this is how alienated you are from everyone else. You listen to this and you think that this sounds normal, but to people who actually believe in their faith, this is not just offensive, it's heresy. And that's who the Democrats have just put up to run for the Senate in Texas, of all places. In their never-ending quest to turn Texas blue, they put up someone who's less relatable than Beto O'Rourke. Question, has anyone told Pam Bondi that the Dow is below 50,000? The House has subpoenaed her to the House Oversight Committee to discuss her role in the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. The Dow is now under 50,000, so I guess she gets to talk to it. It was such an embarrassing performance. So there's a rumor, by the way, the rumor in Texas is that the president may try to appoint Ken Paxton to be Attorney General and push Pam Bondi's side. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that he's going to try to find somewhere to put Ken Paxton, as the president is aligning now to endorse John Cornyn down in Texas since he came in first and heads into that messy 3-month primary. By the way, if you want to support a very good candidate, Chip Roy is running for Attorney General in Texas. He's made it into the runoff. He is where Ted Cruz was nearly blown out of the water in Texas when he ran for the Senate the first time, came in second to a guy who got 48% of the vote, and then wound up winning the runoff. The runoff going into it, Chip got 31% of the vote. If you're a conservative in the United States, Chip Roy for Attorney General in Texas, that is a campaign that you should be supporting. And I can't encourage you enough. He needs every penny possible to get this runoff game going. Please consider supporting Chip Roy. He's a longtime friend of my family. His kids are prayer warriors for my wife. I love him and his family, and he was born to be Attorney General, but he's got to get there, but he needs help to do it. It just, in any event, we've got this shakeup happening in Texas. Allegedly, the president getting involved. The Ken Paxton's supporters are screaming about it, but excuse me, looks like the president wants to shut everything down there because he's worried about the Senate now, which he should be. Also, we got the situation with Steve Daines in Montana. This leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So Steve Daines, who I know and I like, he's a senator from Montana, qualified to run for office again, was left unopposed, and 5 minutes before qualifying ended, he showed up with the U.S. attorney for Montana, who is a friend of his and Donald Trump's. Daines withdraws himself from the ballot. The U.S. attorney puts his name on the ballot, and now there's not going to be a Republican primary in Montana. Now, for you Democrats who are upset about this, hello, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. That's what they did. You really have no grounds to complain. For the Republicans, you actually do have legitimate grounds for saying this is kind of shady stuff. We shouldn't have done it this way, and I get that. For you Democrats, though, you can't really complain about it because that's kind of what Joe Biden did after that debate flub, walked off the stage and handed it over to Kamala Harris. This happens around the country. Both parties do it. There's a history of doing this. It just doesn't sit well with voters. And part of the problem becomes that you become an untested candidate in a general election. Like, for those of you here in Georgia, you've got this messy Republican primary for governor now where Burt Jones looked to be walking away with it. Rick Jackson is a billionaire who entered this race here in Georgia for governor. And now Burt Jones, whether he wins or loses, is going to be on his A game. He didn't have to be on his A game before. Now he's got to be at all times. It's going to make him a better candidate. Whether he wins or loses, he'll be a better candidate. Primaries make you a better candidate. But also, primaries are expensive, and the Republicans wanted to control everything, so that's what they're doing there. And, the Democrats do it too. Now, I got to tell you before I get out of here about Incogni, 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 Incogni.com/Eric, ERICK. So INCOGNI.com/ERICK, Incogni.com/Eric. They can protect your privacy online. They work behind the scenes nonstop, day and night, to get people to take your information off the internet, and they do a remarkably good job about it. Incogni.com/Eric, you get 60% off. You can even give them custom websites, which I did the other day. I found a website that they had not been able to find, was able to send them the link, and they've got my information taken down. Now, what is this sort of information? When you get your driver's license, for example, or you get a credit card, all of your information is for sale. The DMV sells your home address and your birth date, all that stuff to data brokers. Then the credit card companies sell your shopping history. They lay it over. It builds consumer profiles. It builds things for spammers to target, things like that. Incogni works behind the scenes to send the takedown notices, to get it all taken down, to reduce your spam calls, your junk mail, abilities to hack you, identity fraud, all that sort of stuff. Incogni.com/Eric.